Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Vet Files. Gretel and I are going to start by talking about our summer experiences, what we did in between first and second year, some ups and downs, externships, Belize, just some cool stuff, and moments that made us feel like people again after dedicating our whole lives to school after a year. So, Gretel, do you want to start telling us what you did this summer with your short summer?
Yeah, so for Mizzou, I'll open up with my first few weeks. So Mizzou, we have 8 weeks off. So I was like, okay, I really need to do exactly what I want to do because my time is so limited. And I used to teach horseback riding every single summer, and I have a very big connection to teaching children and passing on not just horseback riding, but connecting horses and science. So I came back and I taught horseback riding a few days a week. And I really said, I have such limited time. I'm going to do exactly what I want. So I would teach horseback riding in the mornings. And then in the afternoons, I have a horse in training. So I would go and ride her 3 to 4 days a week and try to relax my next couple days, train my puppy, and go and see my friends at the clinic. They had limited availability as well. It's also hard to pop in clinics too if you're only there like once or twice a week. But I tried my best to make that happen. And as well, I was traveling a lot, which we'll get to later in the segment. But I went to the AVMA convention in Anaheim and then did some solo traveling. Went back for another week for more horseback riding and training. And then I went to Belize and I did mixed animal work and worked with crocodiles. But we'll get more into traveling as the episode goes on. What's like a short glimpse of your summer, Michaela? And I know yours was longer than mine.
Yeah, so LSU, we get, I don't know the week amount, but call it 3 months, give or take, like a normal summer. Mizzou's is just much shorter. So we had basically May to August, give or take a few weeks. And so I decided that with my summer, I was going to do a bunch of externships, which pros and cons too. I have some regrets and some amazing experiences, but it was definitely a way to start. Because basically, the reason I did that is not because I think that every student should do that or that it's necessary or whatever. I know some people feel pressure that they have to do vet med over the summer. I don't think that's the case. The reason I did it is because I got into vet school with very minimal clinical hours. I was in necropsy tech, which I've talked about before, but that does not really lend itself to any live animal learning. If you would have asked me what Apiquil was a year ago, couldn't have told you. Like, just simple things. I had no idea, never heard of a GDV. A lot of stuff I just never seen. I never worked in a small animal clinic and been in that environment. So even throughout my first year on Christmas break, spring externships, I tried to get out into clinics and do externships just to learn. And then I just decided to do that over the summer as well. I also completed paid externships specifically, make a little bit of money. I think they call it a housing stipend, but some of them provide free housing. Or if you're staying home in your hometown, then you can just kind of use that for other things during the summer. So that's what I did. Those were my reasons. And I ended up completing 4 different ones, 2 in Texas, 2 in Louisiana. And so lots of traveling. And it was good. There was some that I liked, some that I didn't love, but overall I learned a lot from each one of them, good or bad. And I also went to Costa Rica with my family and just had a nice little vacation that didn't feel like a very restful vacation. It was a lot of get up and go adventure stuff, but it was still really fun. And then I did a week of training for my student rep position with Hills, which was really interesting in Missouri. But that's a short glimpse. I guess I'll start by talking about my first externship, and I'm not going to be talking about clinic names or towns or getting any more specific, but it was 3 weeks. It was my favorite one of the summer. It was awesome. It was supposed to be mixed animal, but it was mostly small animal. And then I saw 1 goat and 1 pet pig. But I really did learn a lot. It was my first clinic that I felt super welcomed in because I was there longer. I was able to kind of get into a routine, learn where everything was, learn the people, make friends. I would go back there 10 times over. And I mean, it was more of a shadowing experience than very hands-on, but I still saw a lot and learned a lot. It's where I learned about, the new drug for allergies, new Melvi. They were very up to date, I felt, in their knowledge. So it was good to learn some up to date things and some more old fashioned things that they had taken from their vet school. And I think it had 7 vets. So there's plenty to learn and plenty of perspectives and people to talk to with different backgrounds. So it was a great time. Gretel, what did you start out with?
I started out with, at the start of summer, teaching horseback riding. And I would say my perception of horses and like how I teach riding has changed since veterinary school. So just understanding their anatomy more and understanding their physiology and their brain, I felt like I could level up as an instructor. So I shared like my knowledge that I learned, except I could take that information and bring it down to like a kid's level of understanding, which I feel like is a skill that we don't practice enough in vet school, even though I believe that when we are on clinics, we're taught to speak to adults like they have a high school level understanding of vet med, which is probably the case with most people. So for me, being able to talk about like how their lungs work, and I also got pet ducks and like explain how ducks are different from horses. And this is why. And when you're on their back, you know why we trot on the correct diagonal. What does lameness look like? All these things that I was able to bring into my education. So it was really fulfilling. And another part about that, it's really nice to see kids who are interested in learning because in school, at least when I was a kid, I was kind of bored, except for biology and art class. And it's just so nice to see them excited about learning. So that like really filled my cup. And then in the afternoons, I would go and take my horse to the horse trainer. And for me, it's also utilizing my education and talking about like different treatments for them. So having a better understanding of their anatomy and musculature, I could understand more when she was feeling off that day and where she might be sore and why. And I would do body work on her and she'd pretty much fall asleep. So just understanding them on a greater level really made me appreciate horses even more. And it brings back a lot of that passion and wanting to continue forward with schooling because we're so lucky to have all this information. And then I went to the AVMA convention. So right now I am the SAMA president for Mizzou. And pretty much you plan. So I'll explain SAMA a little bit for our listeners. It depends on your school, but at Mizzou, SAMA is an umbrella chapter. So every single club functions under us, and we have grants and insurance, and all the students get benefits through us. So I'm in charge of planning the events throughout the year and representing Mizzou. So we go several times a year to SAMA Symposium, AVMA convention for 2 years in a row. And we train on how to do this efficiently for our school and to make sure that you all benefit. So I was there at AVMA convention in Anaheim. It was a beautiful convention center, hundreds of exhibitors. Oh my goodness, even so much bigger than SEMA Symposium. And it's more catered to veterinarians. They're very happy to have students there, but it's a great place for CE, which is continuing education, which for our audience, veterinarians, once they graduate, they're required to do continuing education. I believe it might be 20 to 30 hours, but correct me if I'm wrong. We're not there yet. We
I
cannot
think
get
it
credit for it.
depends on the state.
Might depend on the
It's up
state.
to their
Okay.
state because you're
Mhm.
licensed through the state, so every state has something different. I thought Texas was like 17. So it says 17 hours of CE annually, and they have some amount of restrictions on whether you can do that online, in person, and some companies or clinics will do paid CE or opportunities will come to the clinic. There's a million different ways to do it, but it's just something to be aware of and interested in because there are so many cool opportunities that even once you're in vet school, you can sign up for a lot of the same ones that vets are doing. And it's amazing information. I've gone to, for example, a vet that was doing some relatively specialized cardiac ultrasounds, and nobody else at that clinic was able to do that, at least to the level that she was doing that. And I said, "Where did you learn how to do this? Obviously, we're not learning to this extent in school. Where did you find this?" And she said, "I've done a lot of CE, and, it's just an interest of mine, and I've done that. I've had that conversation with lameness exams for horses. It's a great resource, and even if it wasn't required, I think that I would still.
Definitely. It's multiple days and you're meeting with people who are like creating change in the industry. Not only that, like the keynote speaker was phenomenal. His name was Dr. Mark Penning. And, fingers crossed you're trying to get him on the podcast. What really stuck with me, and I wish every vet student could say it, because he was like, shout out to the vet students. And we all stood and raised our hand, and there were like 20 of us there that day. He was like, he is a wildlife veterinarian, but he constantly gets questions about how to be the best wildlife veterinarian. And he said, you have to be a great small animal GP first, because that's where you develop all your clinical skills. A lot of the times when you're working with wildlife, a lot of it is hands off. So when you work with wildlife, it's fast. You don't want to put that animal under stress. You have to have good clinical skills. And so, in order to do that, you learn that a lot in small animal GP, which I'm sure you've been practicing, Michaelan. So I did a lot of small animal work in Belize this time around, and I'm really grateful because it is a lot of suturing and things like that that take a lot of practice. So that was my biggest takeaway with him, and just being open-minded about what the field has to offer. He had so many like twists and turns in his veterinary career, and it took him multiple tries to get in. So for me, I was like, okay, here's someone who was an, imperfect individual, now has one of the biggest jobs in the world for veterinarians, being the lead veterinarian at the Disney parks, with having endless amount of means in order to treat animals. And he got there by staying open-minded and working really hard. Additionally, oh, it was so much fun. I had meetings all day with presidents. The delegates had meetings all day. One meeting ran like 4 hours, and we were watching it. That was impressive and long. Pretty much any kind of lecture you could ever think of. And then we went to Disneyland. But for $35 that they gave us, it was quite a deal to go on the rides. I'd get some free food. Then I did some solo traveling after that to LA to see some family. And then I took a quick flight to San Francisco and hiked by myself and saw one of my best friends. And that's pretty much my California journey. But Michaelan, what was it like for you with the next clinic?
So the next clinic I did, basically the way that I set up my summer is I'm in Louisiana at LSU, but I want to practice and live in Texas after. So I was interested in doing more mixed animal and Texas opportunities. So I did 3 weeks in Texas, 2 weeks in Louisiana, and then I stayed in the area so that it would be easier for me to fly in and out from my following trips. So yeah, so 3 weeks Texas, 2 weeks Louisiana. I went to Costa Rica, flew back, went to Hills training, flew to Orlando to a wedding, and then drove back to Louisiana, did 2 more weeks in Louisiana, and then immediately went to Texas for 3 weeks. So that way, my Louisiana ones were on either side of my flight, so I could fly in and out of the same airport. That's how I structured that and why I did it that way. But yeah, so that being said, after coming back from Texas, I went straight into my next externship in Louisiana. And that one was very strict GP. I didn't see a surgery. I didn't see anything. It was just interesting to see that kind of clinic because even though it's not what I want to go into, that's still a necessary kind of clinic. There's so many different kinds, and just reminding myself that, like, okay, each clinic operates differently, and within those clinics, each vet operates differently. So it's just cool to see different types, even if it's not what I want to go into. Stay open-minded. You can learn something from everybody everywhere. But that one was interesting in the fact that I saw more local cases, things that maybe are issues in Louisiana that aren't issues in West Texas where I live, because it's just so humid and nasty down here. There's just such higher rates of things like GI parasites and mosquitoes, heartworm, things like that. Texas has bad heartworm too, but I think a lot of those statistics, I could be wrong, are driven up by East Texas where it's really humid. Where I live in West Texas, it's really dry and there's not a lot of mosquitoes. So heartworm exists, but at lower rates than it does here. So I got to see more, diseases and things that I wouldn't have gotten to see in Texas. So that's another thing to think about, is regional differences when you do your externships. If you are in school in Minnesota, but you want to live in Florida, those are very different environments, different allergies, different bugs and plants in the environment. For example, we have some sago palms in our area here in LSU, like as landscaping and whatnot, that wouldn't really live in maybe where I'm from. I had never heard of people talking about sago palm toxicity until I moved here, and that's a thing here. It's just so interesting how different regions have different things that are going to be common in those clinics. Heat stroke, compared to if you lived somewhere that never gets really hot. I saw some heat stroke cases in both Texas and Louisiana this summer. Big deal in both states, anywhere in the South. But yeah, second one, again, mostly shadowing, not much hands on, just because there was not much to get hands on with. It was a lot of just, annuals, vaccinations. It was okay, nothing negative about it. I was just a little bit bored after seeing such a cool clinic that did so many urgent care and emergency cases that were just crazy off the walls things that I probably won't see again. I mean, my first day, I walked in to get my accommodation set up, and they immediately were like, "Oh, do you want to come pull fluid out of this or chylothorax?" Okay. Like the second I walked in, they were just working a case and I wasn't even in scrubs or anything. And they said, "Come in and do this." And it's something I may or may not see again. But that was interesting. And the second clinic was more just like, you know, just annuals and whatnot. So essential, but not necessarily the most exciting thing to walk into every day. Gretel, what did you do after all of your traveling to California?
Getting back from California, I am like cursed when it comes to traveling too, which is such a bummer because I want to be an international relief vet. And I really liked the point that you brought up, Michaela, about it being different where you go. That is something where, like, if you want to practice in a different place, you really need to talk to the locals and the local veterinarians on what they're treating and what diseases are being spread because the snakes are different, the toxins are different, and the culture with the animals can be incredibly different depending on where you are. So let's see. I got back from California, did more horse stuff, filled my cup again. And then I was nervous about it, but I decided like a couple months ago that I was going to go back to Belize because I wasn't sure when my next opportunity would be. And I just really felt called to it again. But none of my friends could go. So I was like, okay, it's either I just don't go because I am afraid to go alone, or I just do it and take the chance on myself. So I did. I've flown alone before plenty of times, but it's different when you're in a different country all by yourself taking buses. And so, Michaela, you had a lot of traveling alone. So I'm sure you're familiar with oh, where am I supposed to go? Hello, I'm here.
So if you're trying to book housing, double check and email that contact and preferably, in my experience, the clinic manager and say, like, "Hey, just confirming that we're all set for these dates for me to come and stay in your housing," specifically the housing stuff, right? There were clinics that I showed up and the vets didn't know I was coming at all. You can't really control that if you don't have your contact information. But you can certainly let the clinic manager know. There's clinics I've showed up to that they thought my name was something completely different and called me the wrong name the whole time. And it felt too awkward to tell 10 doctors that, "Hey, that's not my name." So I just didn't. Don't do that. And yeah, I definitely showed up to a clinic or two that had no idea I was coming and didn't have housing. I've had to pay for a hotel, which they reimbursed me for, but just some advice from somebody who's been through it, you know? But I still had a great time at those clinics. It was nothing that, I regretted doing. Those were some of my favorite clinics. They just got lost in translation between all of the different people within corporate. Just something to think about. But yeah, I've definitely also traveled alone. International travel alone is a different beast, I feel. When I went to Africa on like a pre-vet trip last year, I was alone and I stayed the night in the Johannesburg airport. I did not realize that their airport closed down after a certain time. So when I said, "I'll stay the night here," I thought that meant that it was going to be a public space with security guards and like we're relatively safe because you have to get through security to get into the airport. Da 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 da. No. No, I was the only person in there other than a couple staff members. So it was definitely interesting. There was also some flight issues where both my mom and the person on the receiving end of the Africa trip to like pick me up, they both thought that I was on an earlier flight. So when I was actually on the flight, and unable to answer my phone, they thought that I was lost and like my plane crashed or something because they were looking at the wrong flight number and I was unable to answer the phone. So I was basically unreachable in a different country for hours. So that was great too. Like it's interesting. Why don't you tell them about your Belize travel issues?
Yes. So I originally got to the airport, and so far, every single flight I've taken this year, I've gotten stranded overnight somewhere. So this was the third time. And so luckily, I was stranded at home, like, got delayed, was going to miss my connection. Next flight out to Belize, such a small country, isn't until the next day. So I'm like all packed up, ready. Great. My suitcase takes off without me. So I'm like, well, the last time I traveled, my suitcase got lost. So I bring back more bags the next day and everything goes smooth. I get to Belize and I'm just like loaded with stuff for 2 weeks. My backpack is completely full. I have another full bag that I did a carry on, which I wasn't going to have otherwise. And then I have this massive suitcase, like filled to the brim. Like the limit is 50 pounds. I was at 48 and a half pounds. Like, I don't know what I was preparing for, but it was bad. Then I get there and they pick me up from the airport. The doctor's there, and they are like the sweetest people in the world. Like Belize's culture is very much like giving. We're going to do all that we can for you. We want to share everything we can. So they picked me up and drove me, and I hadn't seen them in close to 3 years. So it instantly felt back to normal. And I mean, instantly the next day we were in surgery and we were going over like neutering and spaying and suturing again. And, we had to take some clinical skills tests this year in vet school. The knots are a little different in Belize too. So instead of, when we do our normal sutures when we're closing, we tie with the knot facing outward. Well, in Belize, they flip it inward because the dogs are street dogs. So here's just like a little glimpse of what it's like when you are practicing medicine in another country. Some of the medications are not accessible, and generally, antibiotics are given more because the animals are more prone to infection. So that was also like a bit of a culture shock because we try to limit them a lot in the US, but majority of dogs in Belize live outside and a lot of them are street dogs that you're doing. So, when they have surgery, they want to prepare them, make sure they're not getting sick. So they might give antibiotics more often depending on like the condition of the animal. So in Belize, dogs are not treated the same like they are in the US. In the US, they are like our babies who we bring inside with us everywhere. In Belize, they're outside, and a lot of them don't neuter or spay their animals. Now, certain things you'll see that are different. PVT is one of the common diseases there.
It's also different when you're in rural areas of different countries where maybe their entire life source is their animals and their food, and they live on the land and they don't have jobs or money or whatever. They just live on the land, right? We went to a donkey sanctuary, which sounds kind of silly, but every single person on that trip cried. It was absolutely heartbreaking. And these donkeys had been rescued from bestiality situations, from a lot of them were abused or attempted to be killed because just the lifestyle, it was just something that the community members thought was necessary because maybe that animal was getting into their food that they have to live on and give their animals. So it's kind of a survival thing. There's just different experiences that I think people cannot wrap their head around until you leave the country. And it's not necessary, but it's just very eye-opening to see how good we have done in improving animal welfare in America and other countries as well. And it's not to say that any of these other countries are wrong. It's just genuinely a different lifestyle and a different way of viewing animals and livestock. But it's definitely really interesting to see the different cultures with animals because it is different in every single country. When I went to Costa Rica this summer, it was just a vacation, but we're vet students. We're always thinking about the animals. I saw when we were at the beach, tons of stray cats and dogs that just live on the beach. They just live there, or workers that live in that area and go to work every day. They bring their animals with them and they hang out on the beach all day. And all you can think about is like, oh, how many parasites are in the sand? And you're like, it kind of changes your view of it a little bit. But it's also really fun to be in that environment and have animals not more accessible, but in your environment more because there are more strays. I'm not saying that's good or bad, but it's kind of cool. And it definitely makes for some cool pictures. And then also seeing horses tied up on the side of the road. I don't know how they don't get stolen, to be honest, because I feel like they would be stolen in America. But yeah, people tie their horses up on the side of the road, and that's just where they live until they're ready to use them again. It's just different countries do different things.
Definitely. I remember the first time I came to Belize, and it was quite the shock. Like seeing dogs run around everywhere and seeing horses tied up on the side of the road or cows tied up on the side of the road. And I think we have to remember our lens when we look at things because I was hanging out with some of the kids there and we were on this like broken swing set and broken playground. And I could have just fixated on that. But instead, I chose to focus on every single kid there was smiling and having a great time. I didn't have air conditioning for 2 weeks. Like it was quite an adjustment. And I survived and did fine. Some of the animals, honestly, a lot of the problems we see in the US, like anxiety and behavioral issues, they're not seen in these dogs from Belize because they're exercising more. So there are pros and cons, and I don't like dogs being out and about, but there is food for thought about having dogs who have an independent life or having some sort of meaningful existence beyond being in a crate all day and then maybe getting 10, 15 minutes of attention. So I don't want dogs to be out and about, but making sure they have a yard and that they have enrichment in their lives is very important. And I really liked how you made a note of how far we have come because I don't believe that other cultures want their animals to be in any harm. And I don't necessarily, it's hard. I don't think the US, they just do things differently. I'm not going to say something's better or worse because there are arguments for both sides, like having dogs having more exercise, but they're at higher risk for disease or getting hit by a car. It changes things. Or horses who they might be tied, but they're moving them around and they're getting fresh grass and they have water and shade available. Like that's better, in my opinion, than being in a stall all day, 24 hours a day. And they're calm out there. I've never seen a horse tied who's ever caused a problem. So, I mean, anything can get injured, but it is this different understanding. I think it's harder too when you try to like displace your own beliefs on to them. Like all the veterinarians there I've ever met are incredibly like pro spay and neuter, vaccinate, run blood work before surgery, if we can. But if not, they're going to give everything they can to trying to improve the community. And I think that we don't see that enough in the US. Like in Belize, the culture is to help out one another. And so constantly the vets that I've been, they spay and neuter every single day for the Humane Society at a discounted rate. And they just do it to help them out. And some of the spay ways can be different too. You can also do spays on their side, which is for strays to try to keep them from going for their incision and trying to keep it cleaner. So that's something else that I saw was different. And every other weekend doing spay and neuter clinics for the public, doing like 40 to 50 of them. And these doctors have very well rounded lives and they see every single species they can. They see and they'll do every procedure that they can. They'll consult or send things off if they need to. But most of the time, like these veterinarians are the people's only option because of how much money it is to spend stuff off. So for me, it's like these vets are involved in every single sector, whether it's giving back to people who need it most, the Humane Society, doing farm animals, setting up government programs in order to feed the population. And people rely on their animals so much more. They are working with whole different cultures, speaking 3 different languages. Like the skill set goes beyond like what you were talking about, Michaela, when you went to that one practice where they're just doing very, very much GP. Like that could never happen here because we expect so much more.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to say. I've seen things that I plan on taking with me and things that I would never plan on taking with me, you know? I saw vets More than one, which I've never seen before. I don't know. Call it, some equine voodoo magic, right? Have you ever seen the trick where they put their ring on a piece of the horse's tail? Like they rip out a singular strand of hair and then put their ring on it, hold it in one hand, and then touch different parts. Specifically, I'm going to use the example of the lameness exam, right? And then they'll touch different parts of that leg and it's swinging back and forth. And then when you hit some part that is hurting, it starts swinging in a circle. Now, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know the science behind it. I don't know if it's true. I'm not going to claim anything, but I will tell you the couple times I saw somebody do it and then we took x-rays after, the ring worked. The ring was right. Like it could at least give you, are we looking at which joint? It's not going to tell you what's going on in that joint, but I don't know how effective that is. I don't plan on doing it in the future. It was just something to experience and something that was interesting to watch because I'd never seen that before. And I saw two different doctors do it at different clinics. So I don't know where that came from. They're not teaching us that in vet school, but it was something that was interesting and free, just something to look at. Somebody,
Accessible. It's very accessible. Say
it was
someone doesn't have the means and you're like, well, this is an option here.
Yeah, it might not be accurate, but we can try it out. It was just a very bizarre thing to watch. And the vet was like, "Oh, you've never seen this?" I was like, "Well, no." Like, no, I haven't seen that. So that was interesting. Or even just different anesthesia techniques. People pre-med in different ways. They have different little cocktails. Could I sit here and recite any of them? No, but I did notice that. It's not that I didn't pay attention, but I don't think I noticed enough of a difference between them all to choose one or the over the other. I learned things like when they were doing a neuter, some people would do intratesticular lidocaine to help with pain and whatnot, which is interesting, but it's supposed to improve patient outcomes. And there's, I guess, a couple studies on it. Or during a spay, doing kind of like subcutaneous lidocaine along the incision line. That was another one that I saw. Just different uses before surgery that I thought that's really cool. And maybe I will do that. But yeah, literally every single vet will do different things and every single clinic is going to have a different culture. And I could sit here and talk for hours about the different ways that I saw people do different things. Some people scruff cats, some people are very against it. Like name a thing that a vet does and you're going to find if you put 6 vets in a group, 9 times out of 10, all 6 of them are going to have a slightly different way of doing the same thing. It's just an interesting experience. And I think I've talked about it in previous episodes where I brought it up and said, I saw this at this clinic. I saw this at this clinic because they were all so different and so incomparable. And especially when you do international work, that's a whole different ballgame. I mean, we went to a little I'll call it cat spay neuter vaccination, kind of like a TNR program, trap neuter release, with all of their spay cats or stray cats in Africa, and they are doing surgery, spays and neuters with injectable anesthesia and no gas mask, no monitoring other than you physically taking a heart rate and
No
respiratory.
intubation.
And
It's
I
just
think,
go.
yeah, and I think that's pretty common. I think if anybody's interested in it, they could go listen to our episode with Lauren Cabrera. She talks about what she has to do with her clinic in Saipan with limited resources. 10 times better to provide those opportunities. And if one case out of 1,000 goes wrong, I still think that it's going to be better for that animal population and stray population than if you didn't do TNR programs at all.
Definitely.
You have to weigh
It's
those things.
My thing is I think we have to drop our pretentious idea that medicine needs to be white lab coat and white walls and realize that vet med is everywhere, whether it's the string in the ring for the horse's injury, whether it's injectable anesthesia in not the cleanest, most perfect facility in the world, but we're prepping the animals for surgery. They have clean tools. You have skilled surgeons, and at the end of the day, you're still producing, healthy animals out of this, and you're still doing what you can because what is the other option? Absolutely nothing. Who does that benefit when we're just going to have thousands of more animals and we're just going to have the spread of it? Disease. But these are resources that we have that we can give very small cost in comparison to the US. So my response to anyone who's saying okay, change this up internationally. Okay, fine. Where are we going to have the funds? Because gowns are expensive, drapes are expensive. A facility that has amazing monitoring, these are expensive. And when you're spending 40, 50 a day and you have a staff of 2 or 3, the fact that they can do so much good, and like you said, Michaelan, like, it might be the off chance that something goes wrong. I haven't seen that happen yet with injectable anesthesia. And, when I have my own clinic in the US, like, I will be operating on the standards that we were taught in school for our own due diligence. But when I go internationally, I'm going to do what I can to produce the most good for the area, because I cannot tell you, like, every time I have ever traveled internationally, they've always told me, like, we need a vet here. Like, we're desperate. Like, the closest vet is an hour and a half away. People don't have the means to make it that far. Like, even if someone came for 2 weeks, like every few months, it would still make a measurable difference. So I think we need to drop our pristine standard, because I saw people doing so much good for the community, giving what they could.
But these are important things to think about that I don't think it just depends who you're talking to. There are students who are super open-minded and completely understand because regardless of how open-minded you are, it can be a shock to see it for the first time, to see how things are practiced in America at top hospitals and vet schools versus how things are practiced even in America. I'm not even going to use the example of rural hospitals because A, it's not all rural hospitals. Some are doing gold standard. It's just those are typically clinics that are going to be more affected by financial constraints and, just lack of opportunity, geographic challenges. Anyway, the point is there are 50 different ways to do the same thing, and you need to be open-minded that people can get to the same result doing a different method. And if you're the person that's going out to clinics or farms or other countries, wherever you're going, you don't even have to leave your state to see something practiced a different way. You just open your minds a little bit and understand that people practice different ways. And going out to a clinic and being disrespectful and hating on the way they do something isn't going to change anything. And it reflects poorly on yourself and your character. But
Right. As long as you're not actively causing harm to an animal or prolonging their pain, at the end of the day, like, we took an oath to help. And if this is going to help them, I think we should do it. I think to do more good and make things accessible does a lot of good. I also got to see New World screwworm, which, yeah, multiple cases of it, actually. So seems like it's so scary in the US, but they see it quite often in Belize. And what I learned during the time is if you catch it quick enough and clean out the eggs, like, your dog has a very good chance of being completely fine. You can also, like, treat it with dewormer because, this is a parasite. So it's not like no options exist. It's just the timeline. So they can lay hundreds of eggs a day and they grow considerably fast. So the cases that did not do well were the ones where people were negligent. Or they might not be in good health themselves. Their dog could be outside. They could not be monitoring them. So I always stress, like, do a check over of your pet every single day. Like, if they have a cut, that's where screwworm will go in an attack. So for all the spays and neuters that we were doing that week, or any surgery from any dog attack or wildlife attack, we preface them, you need to keep your dog inside because of screwworm. Because this not only will be an expensive bill to come back and fix, because we're going to have to go into surgery again, prognosis gets worse the more you put it off. Like, within a few days, it's fatal. So I would say, like, let's not freak out. Let's just educate the public instead on what we need to do. And who knows? We have taken care of it. As far as I know, in the US, they're doing a very good job in Texas at monitoring it. But at the end of the day, this is the world. Like, they're probably going to reach. They might reach further in the US eventually. So it's just something to keep note of. Any injuries with animals. Isn't that crazy, Michaelan? And it smells horrible.
yeah, well,
Like,
it's in living tissue because the difference between
yes.
the New World screwworm and
Mhm,
your like typical maggots is maggots are
mhm.
eating dead tissue and the New World screwworm is eating live tissue and they're extending that wound and whatnot. So yeah, I can imagine that it wouldn't smell very great. I've been very lucky not to see it over the summer, but I did forget about that was a major event this summer. I don't want to say it got blown out of proportion because awareness is critical and people do need to know that it's not eradicated anymore and that it is a possibility, especially in the areas and states that it's been found. But I do think some of it was very much like, oh my God, my dog's going to die of this new parasite.
All over the news, panicked.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of widespread panic that maybe we could have contained a little more because awareness is essential, but I don't know if it was like COVID toilet paper worthy panic. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's all just about educating people on what to look out for. I mean, the fact that it can affect any species, including humans, is scary, but really it's if your animal has an injury, you need to be aware of it. That this is a possibility that could happen. I felt like I was a part of history. I don't know. It was very cool. Very, very cool because I'd been reading about it. And so that was probably like the extent of my super cool cases, like a lot of practice with surgery, my hands getting used to suturing again and like tying ligatures. It's okay for it to feel awkward. I don't think people talk about that. They just see people, oh, I did my first spay and neuter. No, it's not an easy skill. Like this takes lots of practice. So it was cool to just relive it and then left me alone as they were on the other side of the room. And these were rescues. So we were already doing a good cause for them. And then the next week, I went to the Crocodile Research Coalition a few hours away and took a bus and another travel thing. The bus left an hour early without me. So I had to wait all day to get on the next one. But I made it and I got there at like 9 p.m. at night in complete darkness and was hoping I would be fine. I wanted to be a part of the CRC because this isn't intentionally with our school, but I have felt gaps in my education in how to make sustainable change in the community. And I listened to some podcasts with the founder of the CRC, who we are going to have on our page. And she talked about community outreach and how much that has changed the reality. So it used to be that people really hated Crocs in the area, but Dr. Tejas was able to convince people by setting up ambassador programs with the children and educating members at public events about what the crocodiles mean to the environment and how really they're not a threat. Don't go swimming at night. Don't feed the crocs, and you're not going to have a problem. They exist for a reason in nature. And I think with our environment in the US right now, with so much confirmation bias, it's hard to say lose hope in that, but it can be. So for me, I was like, here's someone who did it. Like they changed an entire culture about crocodiles where people are now attached to the crocodiles in the neighborhood where no one is going to attack them. Like nothing's going to happen because they're part of the community now. And I want to see that in vet med in the US. Like, I want people to understand the importance of vaccination, to understand the importance of neutering and spaying. And I do see that as a future in Belize too, to have neutering and spaying being like a part of their culture and having that change. And I do think it will in time. So just, it was such like a level of inspiration and respect. And I think something that we don't talk about in vet med because, we have our clients who come in, they call us, they schedule. We're not begging people to come to our door and listen to us because we're already swamped. But I want the people who don't have access to us already to come in and have a conversation. I don't know, Michaelan, have you seen a lot with public outreach in vet med?
I know some people say there was no plan B. I had a plan B. I wanted to be an ag teacher. If I wasn't doing this, I'd be an ag teacher. I have a huge passion for connecting with even people on the same level as me. If I can help my classmate, or we have like bigs and littles in vet school, at least at LSU and a couple other schools. So helping my littles transition into their first year of vet school, helping pre-vets with their essays or just looking over things or giving them advice or just sharing stories of what I did or what I didn't do and what I thought I should do. And that's not me telling them, oh yeah, I'll get you into vet school. I know how to get into vet school. No, 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 no. That's just even just talking to them and sharing my experiences and saying, I was not a perfect applicant. I made it in and I'm thriving and I'm doing great and I'm so happy here. I always try to bring it up because there is a narrative and pre-vet advisors, some vet school people push this so hard. Like, you have to have a 4.0, no C's, you have to have a however, I was told all of these things to get in. And each one of those things are important, but it's not necessarily that you have to check every single box to the highest level. Maybe you have really good academics and slightly less clinical hours. Or in my case, I had a mid GPA, relatively low clinic hours, but I had really extensive leadership experience and extracurriculars and a genuine commitment to community and people, the people part of it, you know? And I think that kind of made me stand out in a way too. I had tons of customer service and community outreach experience. And so even in vet school, so LSU does something called service learning. It's required for first years, and you go out into the community and teach, whether that's a third grade classroom. An example I did was first graders at a local elementary school get to adopt a cow from a local farm and follow their story throughout their first grade year. And so I went out and told them about the basics of cows. You know, what's a steer? What's a heifer? What are these things? That was really rewarding. Or doing a career day at another elementary school. That was super cool. I think that vet students, even pre-vet students and veterinarians get very disconnected from the fact that we are the people that we used to look up to. I know 2 years ago when I was working at the vet school and seeing these vet students come in and out of my rotation that I worked at, it was like, oh my gosh, these people are so cool. Like, how are you here? And how am I talking to you? Like, this is so cool. And now we are those people. And that's not to boost your ego or anything, because it's an incredible responsibility to inspire the next generation or next year of vet students, of pre-vets, you know, doing these career days at elementary schools. I'm not saying that I inspired a kid to dedicate their life to veterinary medicine, but even just educating them, I talked about, what do vets do? What do we do? What is our goal? Is it only puppies and kitties? No, I live in a city right now, so some of those kids' understanding of vet med was very limited. We're talking about elementary kids, but also they do think that we only do dogs and cats. You know, there are so many opportunities for education. I've gone out on farm calls and had grown adults in their 40s or 50s say, I mean, people hear it all the time. I could never do what you do, put down animals. I love animals too much. Okay, well, that's our chance to go in and talk about it. I understand that sometimes that is a privileged viewpoint of mine because I'm not a vet that is constantly tired and having the same conversations over and over and over. But I do think even if you had that conversation 1 out of the 10 times it comes up, that it could change a mind, it could change a life, it could change just somebody's viewpoint on something. You know, I think I used the example last episode. Somebody said, are fleas year round? That is your opportunity to say, yes, they are. Here's how flea prevention works. You know what I mean? Even if it takes 2 minutes and it becomes exhausting time after time after time, if you do it 1 out of the 10 times it comes up in your day, you changed somebody's mind. And I know that appointment times are limited, but if somebody says, my daughter wants to be a vet, well, that's so cool. Like, does she know? Yeah, any chance that you can get to connect with people is so meaningful to me. Connecting with the first years, now that I'm a second year, has been amazing. Connecting with pre-vets now that I'm in vet school has been amazing. I signed up to be an alumni mentor for my undergrad College of Ag. I mean, all of those opportunities are just so rewarding. And I think they just forget that, again, we are the people we once used to look up to. Not an ego thing, but a responsibility and an opportunity to help people around you, doing the bare minimum, existing, talking to them, listening to them and their stories. Sometimes that's all it takes, you know, because somebody can feel so connected to you and all you did was hear about what vet schools they're applying to, and you didn't even necessarily have to give it advice.
Definitely. I think there's something really special about vet med and animals in general. Like, we were working on the Crocs, and we had this fabulous, like, famous trainer who happened to be there that week that I was there, and his name is Fabio Morsi. And just, like, the level of education that he had, any conversation you would have with him and any of these people at the CRC, it was like, "I'm gonna share everything I know with you. Like, I'm gonna answer all your questions. I'm going to do everything I can to have you understand and have you really, like, immerse yourself in this." And I haven't laughed harder probably in years than spending time with these people. They were also so well-rounded. And there is this weird theory that conservationists, zookeepers, biologists, and veterinarians don't get along. And here we were working seamlessly as a team. One was a trainer, I'm a vet student. We had a biologist and a conservationist, like fish and wildlife. And we're all going towards this common goal of improving the lives of animals. And my role there was to learn more about not just them like in the wild, but like what does it mean to do like bio surveys and do eye shines and have population numbers in the area and keep DNA samples. And mostly I was there to learn their training. You would be blown away, Michaelan. We get there in this 12-foot crocodile. They're telling him to come out of the water. All they have is like a PVC stick. Stay. Oh, he does. Target, like tap his nose on the PVC. He listened better than my dog. All of them did, even if they were blind. Like these animals, these are the ones that they have in captivity who cannot be re released, were trained so well. And they are constantly looking to improve it to the point where you could touch some of their tails while they're target trained and perform like blood draws. And that's what I want to learn about because that improves welfare. They were trained better than people's dogs. You forget how brilliant they are. And, the ones in the wild, we don't want to train them to do any of these things. They should be afraid of humans. But the ones in captivity, like what conservationists and zookeepers are working on, it's just mind blowing. And they're doing it to improve the lives of animals and making our jobs easier. Because we're not the ones catching the crocodiles. Like Michaela and I, when we show up to treat animals, sorry, but like we've had 8 years of school. We're not supposed to hurt our hands. Our hands are to give help to you, not in a bad way, but our job is to perform the surgery, get in and get out, and hopefully set up good welfare protocols and work with the scientists there. So for me, it was very eye-opening, and it was just what I needed because I wanted to see, like, the role of veterinarians in the real world tied to all these other professions. And really, we can work together. We just have to listen to each other.
I mean, even in the 1 week that I spent in Costa Rica, we went out and did like a little riverboat tour of a little area, and there was a crocodile there. This is a bad example. This is what we should not be doing with wildlife, but it was still really cool just to witness. At some point in this crocodile's life, it had been fed and it knew its name. And so these guides can come out there and call him, and he comes right up, and they were like, we don't feed him. We don't do that. But somebody has in his life, and now he responds to his name. It was mind blowing because they were like, oh yeah, we're looking for him. He's usually in this little area. And then they, stopped the boat and they called his name and he swam right up. And I was like, well, okay, like this is a bad example of something that should never have been done to this crocodile, but it's still mind blowing how smart they are because I don't know, to me, I think of like a crocodile or alligator sitting at the zoo and they just sit there. And it's crazy to think that they're capable of all of that. Yeah, I have an obsession with the pigs, the cats, the dogs that have the talking buttons on social media. It
I
is
read a book on it. Honestly, I did. It was I have the buttons for my dog.
Yes. It is mind-blowing what they can learn and how they can communicate if you give them the tools to do so and work with them enough. I'm not gonna say that your 13-year-old Chihuahua is gonna be perfectly capable of getting a 300-word vocabulary in the next year, but, there's always room for growth, and it's crazy to see how much they can learn. I think we look at them as inferior or like, they can't learn all that, they don't know English. You'd be shocked at how animals can communicate with us, both nonverbal and verbal if you give them those tools, Just crazy. Costa Rica, it wasn't necessarily a wildlife trip, it was genuinely just a family vacation. But even on that vacation, we went zip lining and the howler monkeys in the trees, every time they heard the zip line went crazy. And if you've never heard a howler monkey's howl, look that up because it's definitely terrifying the first time you hear it if you weren't warned that they were there. And there was 30 of them right next to us, and we didn't interact with them or bother them other than the zip line making noise. But, it's just crazy that we coexist with them and they just learn to adapt and to be honest, you can make an argument that we shouldn't be in that space, but there are certain spaces that humans and animals share. Honestly, every space, but some of them are shared with more wildlife that we don't usually see outside of those opportunities.
Yeah, and that's why I think our job is so important too as veterinarians is that we have to know that as the human population is increasing, like we are encroaching on their wild territory. And that increases the spread of disease. And not only that, but like you and I having this understanding of what is normal behavior for these wild animals, what is abnormal behavior that we're seeing pop up. Why can we educate the community on why to not feed crocs? Well, they don't have fear of you anymore. Like you're more prone to getting hurt, really, really hurt. And all these other things where it's like, this is literally the most diverse job in the world. Like I had a week with crocodiles and I'm going to go back. I'm going to go to Guatemala next year and do wildlife work. And my job, my wonderful, beautiful job, allows me to do that. And I just have to work like crazy during the year and study.
I compare it to human medicine where it can be very difficult to switch specialties, and you do have to choose some amount of specialty, even if that specialty is like family medicine, where you're not choosing one organ system to work on for the rest of your life, right? But you have to choose something, and you have to commit to that, and you have to do a residency, and all of these extra steps, and you kind of lock yourself into one type of practice, give or take. You can move practices that operate differently, but you are most likely going to be doing and dealing with the same kinds of cases. I'm making generalizations, right? But just in general, okay? You're going to be committing to one body system or one type of practice for the rest of your life. Versus a veterinarian, I love to tell people like if you're not happy with your job as a vet, switch specialties. You have the full opportunity, the degree, the qualifications to do something totally different. If that means you need to go back to school and do a residency, you could. That's an option, but you could also switch. And I think you do have some amount of obligation to do more research and training in that area, but you don't have to complete like a 3-year residency or specialize or get boarded in that subject. You could go into government work and work in an office and honestly never touch an animal again if that's something you're interested in. There are so many opportunities that I wasn't even aware of until really I started vet school. And that's one of the reasons that I think our episode with Dr. Thurston was so great, because talking about the residency and internships and da 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 da, that is one of so many opportunities that you can do. That is not something you have to do. GP is one option that you don't have to do any additional training for, but has so many different variations. You could be working in a clinic that has very limited resources, and that type of medicine is completely different from somewhere where if you did GP community practice at a vet school. You know what I mean? Just completely different. If you are unhappy with your job, switch. There's 50 others, more than that, hundreds of others.
And they're desperate. That sounds horrible, but we really need vets pretty much everywhere. Like, or go internationally if your license qualifies or work under a different veterinarian internationally. I I love traveling and working at the same time. Like I don't like vacationing. I'm a horrible tourist. I like to see like the spots and then go back to work and meet people in the community. And that's really when you get inspired. For me, at least, when I meet people in the real world who live completely different lives than me, but here they are showing up for their animal. And I'm going to show up for their animal too. So you never know. Like I always say, Michaela, we're going to go to Africa again. We're going to go to Egypt. Like,
I
it's
know
going to be awesome.
I need to collect some money and pay for a trip because I love.
Yes.
But that is something that sucks, is like finding those opportunities when you don't have the financial resources. And I'm like, I'm in
Yeah.
that situation. I get it. I was very privileged to have some, amount of that Africa trip paid for.
We worked so hard in undergrad for these opportunities, and that's why I can do this now. That's why like my international travel is pretty much covered, is because we said yes to these opportunities before, and now we have long-standing relationships with these travel companies.
Yeah. And so that's something to think about that again is it's limited, not everybody has that opportunity, but you can still, okay, for example, I wanted to do my externships in Texas this summer. Did I have the money to do so? No, not really. But I found paid externships that, it was $500 a week, which I think when you do the math equates to about $12 an hour if you're working 40 hours a week. But it can cover things like your gas to get there or your food while you're there, things like that. You're not going to maybe profit from it, but you can definitely get your expenses covered, especially if you find ones that have housing provided, because that's one less expense that you have to worry about. So that was something that it was a limitation and obstacle that I had to figure out. How am I going to travel with my financial limitations? And the answer was finding paid externships. There's also externships that are not paid, but they do provide housing or opportunities through your school. Like I completed one that was paid for by a federal agency, and it was all expenses paid. They paid for my food, my travel, my housing, etc. And I didn't leave the state of Louisiana, but it was still, there are opportunities out there. And if you're not in vet school, I told some first years last week, you don't even know the amount of emails you're going to get with just cool stuff. It's going to be harder to choose which one you want to do than it is to find those opportunities. But those are really hard to find as a pre-vet. It's hard to Google travel opportunities for pre-vets. Both of us have done a lot of work with like Worldwide Vets. So I could feel confident in recommending them. I know Loop Abroad is one that has good reviews. I have not personally completed a trip with them, but there are companies out there that are trustworthy and not trying to scam you out of your money. I actually couldn't name a company that I've heard a bad experience with. For the majority, nobody's out to get you, nobody's out to scam you. See if you can find a person that you can talk to about their experience. So if you see somebody posting, OMG, I completed this really cool pre-vet trip in Africa, reach out to them and say, hey, what company was this? I'm interested in this. How much was it? Because not all of these companies publish their prices. Some do, some don't.
Yeah, some
These
are
are important
vastly
questions.
different as well. Some
Yeah.
are vastly different.
Yeah, Gretel has done many more than me. I just had that opportunity because of our APVMA positions. And that's something that, I would have never been able to complete if it weren't for Worldwide Vets' generosity and our work with the APVMA. That's just another one of many privileges that you can get when, the art of saying yes without spreading yourself too thin. But because of saying yes and having the courage to get up and speak in front of, I don't know, what was it, 500, 800 people, and doing that little speech, getting elected as an officer, completing my year of service, I was able to go to Africa with, a majority of that expense paid. So there are so many opportunities. If you just say yes and stay open minded, they open so many other doors for you. One thing I regret not doing is getting more involved in SAVMA last year. I wish I had done more. I have other positions that take up my time, and honestly, I probably couldn't keep up with all of my SAVMA stuff if I did do it, but it's something that is super cool that I've seen open so many doors and cool opportunities and cool trips for my friends at LSU or Gretel or other schools.
So I think the overall theme of our episode for this summer is that say yes to the opportunities. Just don't automatically say no to something because you don't think you'll be able to afford it. Like my stay in Belize was my hotels were like 25 US a day and the food was incredibly reasonable. So you don't know because traveling in the US might actually be more expensive and my flights were a lot cheaper. You never know. Or look for opportunities that are paid. They do exist. Communicate, double check that they know you're coming. And also, like, you're going to have ups and downs. Like, I had to hitchhike because I was going to get stranded the whole day and I survived. I wouldn't recommend it to our audience, but it was a Belizean tradition and it was a normal thing. And scared out of my mind, but I survived and it was perfectly fine and I made it early. So you never know and work with every single species you can. Talk like don't think you're better just cuz you're a vet student. All these animal careers are amazing too. But that's my long story short. What about McKillen? What's your wrap up of this summer?
I think, kind of the same thing. Recognize that there are ups and downs. My summer wasn't perfect. There were things that I don't need to talk about on here, but that I would have rather never experienced. But I think the advice that I've gotten from family members and people that I talk to about it is like, okay, well, you've seen this. And now you know certain things that you can look for, whether it's your future leadership team or yourself, things that you don't want to do to your future employees, future vet students, or the opposite, ways that you can improve that experience if you notice somebody is feeling that way or that you think they're lacking that, create an opportunity for them. One thing that I think I wish more clinics had, again, I understand that veterinarians are already overworked, underpaid, etc. But if you're a vet or a clinic manager that just feels very passionately about making an experience better for vet students or pre-vet students, is creating an externship program. Okay, day one that they come in, we're going to sit down with them for 5 to 10 minutes and say, what are your goals while you're here? What is your experience? Because every single vet student is different. I'm going into these small animal clinics with minimal small animal experience before this summer. So I'm not going to be ready for jumping in and doing spays and surgeries. You know what I mean? I want to start with kind of shadowing and taking a back seat and experiencing and learning in that sense versus somebody who worked in a small animal clinic for 5 years is going to want to go in and do the cool stuff and get in there. And maybe they're going into rooms and starting histories and whatnot themselves. Every student is genuinely different. So a 5-minute conversation at the beginning of their trip will make such a difference in their 2, 3, however many weeks. And at the same time, showing them, hey, here's where you put your stuff. Hey, what's your name? Because again, I got called the wrong name for 2 weeks at a clinic and I could have corrected them, but it was just very awkward because it was like 8 or 9 doctors and all of the techs. And it was like, how do I even start? Like, by the way, my name is McKaylin, not Michaela, but advocate for yourself. If your clinic that you're externing at doesn't have those opportunities and it's something that you feel strongly about, again, not necessary, but if you wanted to make the experience for the next student better, talk to them about these things. I've talked to one of the many clinics I've externed at, and they've implemented that. And, I can't wait to go back and see if they've noticed a difference with their student extern experiences. But yeah, recognizing that there's ups and downs and not every summer is perfect. Every person's summer is different. I know people who relaxed all summer and I was very jealous of them. And I actually wish I'd given myself more of a break. So don't feel obligated to complete all of these crazy experiences. We don't get summers off when we go to the real world. So if you want to take your summer off and chill and sit on Instagram all summer, that's totally up to you too. If you want to do crazy stuff, do externships, work all summer, that's up to you too. One other thing I wanted to bring up is I was told something to think about if you're interested. I was told to study the information that I didn't do well on from first year. Did I do that? No. But that was advice from a vet. Take it as you will. And I couldn't tell you if it would have been beneficial or not because I didn't do it. So just advice from somebody else that isn't me.
When I went to the crocodiles, I opened up my notes about crocodiles, which was like 2 PowerPoints. And then I learned so much more while I was there. Before surgery, I did a slight bit of anatomy review. It was more like, okay, on the spot when he's pulling out these structures, can I name every single part and like understand why? And I watched some YouTube videos on the surgeries before I went in, a little bit of preparation. But was that hardcore studying every single like physiological thing? No. I'm sorry. I get 8 weeks off. I needed a break. Really, really needed a break. So I also took time, like taking time for yourself, saying yes to things that scare you, and overall doing things alone is not a bad thing. Like I said this on one of our posts, but you have your community that supports you. But at the end of the day, it's like my brain and my hands that are getting me through this. And they need to be able to do this on their own. Like if I want to be an international relief vet, I'm going to have to get used to traveling internationally alone and being smart about it too. So don't hitchhike like what I did, but it worked this time. So
Yeah, I I don't want to say that I regret doing what I did this summer, but I do wish that I had given myself more time off. Yes, I had a little vacation, but that was a very up and atom vacation without a lot of napping or resting. And I ended up working myself into the literal ground. And I didn't mention that on top of these externships, I was also working part time at a clinic as a receptionist and working late nights. There was a day, I guess technically 2 days, where I worked 24 hours straight. and I don't recommend that. And at the end of the summer, I had to leave one of my externships early because I had run myself into the ground so much that I got an incredibly bad strep throat infection that for reference, I don't think I've been to urgent care since high school, junior high, and I went to urgent care 3 times in 1 week because I felt so awful because my body was just so exhausted. I just ran myself into the ground and I regret doing that. And yes, I learned so much, but that's why I stress so much that like don't feel like you have to work that hard and prove yourself to somebody. I signed up for those things without knowing my limits, and I exceeded my limits. So between working technically 3 jobs, if you count my student position, my externship, and my, like, clinic job, so 3 jobs, and it was just constant, constant, and I didn't give myself a break, and I regret that. So if you want my takeaway, it's okay to rest, and I knew that. It was just like, I thought that my little vacation and some nights off were gonna be fine, and I think I definitely needed more. In between externships, I would end one on Friday, start the next one on Monday. I literally took no breaks. So if you want some advice from me, take a break. Again, it's your last summers, your last opportunity to do so, to sit and do nothing. So don't feel bad if that's what you do, you know?
Definitely. I think we should end on our question of what brought you joy today?
It's weird to get asked that because I feel like I'm usually the one asking it.
Yes.
What did I do today? I went to class, and I think something that brought me joy is going into second year. So, for reference, first year is all learning the normals, right? So, going into second year, knowing that it's really scary and it's going to be the hardest year of at least LSU's vet school academically, but knowing that I'm going to come out of it already 3 days in, I feel like I have learned so much that it's so applicable to what I'm gonna be doing. Obviously, we wouldn't learn things that are not applicable, but finally getting to the point where it's like, okay, I'm learning diseases and what affects different animals and not necessarily how to treat it yet, but you can start thinking about those things. What have I seen in clinics and applying that information actively as you're learning the disease in class? You're like, I recognize that from what I've seen on my externships or from before vet school. And now I know how that disease works, even something as common as allergies, right? Learning how that works and how do we approach it. So, what's bringing you joy today?
So, my old art teacher from elementary school messaged me on Instagram because she likes to watch all of the vet stuff we post. Isn't that so sweet? So, she's like, my neighbor's granddaughter, who is 8, is obsessed with being a veterinarian. Could she come over and meet your animals? And this little girl she's like, have you spayed and neutered? What's the biggest animal you've worked with? She meant my horses, my cats, my ducks, my puppy. My bunnies were hiding, but that's okay. They're like, this is too much commotion. And it was just so nice to see like what we were like when we were kids. And now we are living our dreams as hard as it is. And I told her, you have to have good grades, but that doesn't mean you need to be good at everything initially. Like how you learn doesn't mean how smart you are. I said the most important thing is to stay open minded and ask for help when you need it. And I wish someone had told that to me when I was 8, because I just thought we had to be all perfect initially, but we really don't. Like the ones who do really well in vet med are the resilient ones who ask for help. So that's what I'm passing on to our next generation. I also tell it to all my riding students to ask for help. And it's okay. Let's all be obsessed with horses and animals. I am, and it's the best thing in the world.
Yeah, and I mean, that just is another example of like, we are literally the people that we used to look up to. And so, one small conversation that could be something that little girl carries with her for the rest of her life. And even if it isn't, it changed her day. Just recognizing that that was you. Who would you have wanted to be in that moment? Like, who did you need when you were growing up? Again, doesn't have to be a full time mentor scenario, but if somebody comes up to you and is like, I want to be a vet, be nice, you know? Because I'm not the only person that can say this, but I have personally met people, even once I started vet school, that were like, change careers now. Are you kidding? Anyway, but yeah, let's end on our joy notes about the positivity that both of us have been able to bring to those under us and those around us. And Thank you for listening to the Vet Files. We hope this episode was a fun, casual change of pace from all of our interviews about vet specific specialties and whatnot. And we'll see you next time.